We're here with Bonin Bough, the co-founder and chief strategy officer of Group Black. Thank you so much for being here, Bonin.
David, I would be no place else but here with you.
I love that. I appreciate that. And we appreciate you.
So you know how I feel about this community.
Of course. This community wouldn't be this community without people like you.
It wouldn't be without you, my friend. What you've done here is pretty spectacular. So
I love it. And we can keep the love fest going all day, but I want to dive into it. We're getting time for dinner and drinks, and I don't want to keep you away from all of that. So let's talk about something. You've been on the brand side. The CMO of Group Black reports into you, and something that we've been talking about a lot with our community is CMO tenure. And we're at a point where the average CMO is in 18 months, 24 months, maybe 40 months on the longer side of things. But it's the lowest level that it's been in the past decade and continues to get smaller. What's going on with the CMO position, and how can we maybe set our CMOs in this industry up for success?
You know, it's funny because years ago, I wrote a piece with Korn Ferry, and it was on kind of where I see the future of marketing. And I said, I think the chief growth officer role is going to become the most important role inside the organization. Now, we all know tech companies have had chief growth officers for years, but to say that from a CPG perspective, it really hadn't been done. I think at this point, what we're seeing is that marketing has been so far decoupled from the sales function and ultimately from the growth function. So the challenge that you continue to have is the efforts that you make to move the business forward from a brand perspective. How do you tie that into actual impact and ultimately outcomes? And so what the challenge that the CMO today has is, how do they prove that the dollars that they're spending or the programs and campaigns that they're putting into market, unless they have wildly successful, huge out of the gate impact, how do they prove that it's moving the business? And in the absence of that, then everything you do becomes, based on arbitrary metric. And that's where the challenge is. And sadly, instead of the industry really focusing on how do we understand and put even better analysis, measurement, and insight around the majority of the spend, we carved off this new area called performance marketing. And even the lexicon itself suggests to the world that, okay, this bit of marketing is the only marketing that performs, but all the rest of this money that I spend, it's not performance marketing. And I remember even when we were selling cookies, I used to say, look, I don't know what the direct response, that's another way I said, I don't know what the difference is between direct response and brand, because what I want to do is I want to have every single piece of media that we put into the marketplace, at least digital at that time, translate into the potential for a consumer to buy. And I was told, well, that's not brand advertising. I said, well, isn't the best representation of brand love purchase? Like I can say, oh, I love Oreo, but if I don't buy it, how much do I really love it? So I think that's the current challenge, which continues to be a measurement issue, and in the absence of being able to prove. Now, it's interesting, you have had companies, we talked about digital transformation for years, yada, yada, yada. You have had companies that have moved so far that they operate much closer to, their tech cousins, so they can actually see impact across the entire marketing funnel. But those are few and far in between because so many people fought kicking and screaming that they are woefully behind. And then, quite frankly, there's a lot of our measurement players that haven't really done a great job of supporting that role. So that's kind of why I think the tenure. But I do think that that's going to change. And I think that the change that we're going to see, I do believe the growth officer, but it'll continue to be CMO title, but they will be responsible more now for growth. Because what's going to happen is the world's going to get much more difficult. And, what we're going to see is that people forget, especially in the leadership role, how important the power of brand really is. And the only thing that will save you in tough times is that people love you. And so in the absence of building that and in the constant rotation where you're not actually creating a brand that people love, you're going to struggle. So I do think that the CMO role is safe, but I think in long term, but I think in the short term, the real answer is they have to fix the ability to showcase accountability.
Well, I think that you hit it on the head, right? It's about the short term versus the long term, right? And when you have that pendulum swinging between brand and performance, or for the tech world, if it's acquisition or whatever it might be, you're paying to acquire your own customers again and again, right? But when you build brand and you build loyalty, they're your customers for life.
I think the tech world suffers from they follow each other, right? And so it's like lemmings. But my whole point, and look, I'm close to a lot of tech business. My wife has a baby food business, and my whole point was, you can play the algo game, right? And you can pretend that somehow your decisions are going to be so much smarter than the other person, but it's really an incremental. Maybe you'll be incrementally better, but you're not going to create transformational growth, which is what you really want. And that's only created, I believe, by brand and creativity, right? So you have to create breakthrough, or else, there's no winning in this game without it.
Absolutely. So let's transition for a second. It's 2023. CES, we're days removed from New Year's parties and whatnot. Everybody's talking about their plans for the year, the trends that they're seeing, that they're watching. You've always had a very holistic view of this industry. What trends, or if there's maybe one trend or multiple trends, what are you thinking about? What's top of mind for you? What are you excited about going into this new year?
It's interesting. As I see everybody here, the thing I'm excited about the most, and this is going to sound very strange, is, look, I love the creator economy. I mean, we have a huge footprint in the creator economy with our, announcement of our Group Black company, sister company, Creator. And I definitely believe that, creators are the new startup, and we're going to see the expansion and explosion continually of that. And I think that I'm very excited for brands to begin to invest in creators, not just as influencers, but as in people who create passion projects and create audiences, and actually begin to coexist and work alongside them versus asking them to, hey, just hold up my product. So I think that's going to be a very interesting world. I think we're going to see brands as owners, finally, truly, of content, where, I can own, a doc, and I can put it out to the world. I can own feature length. I think that world where branded content, for me, the reason why, like when we did stuff like Drop the Guy Out of the Sky with no parachute, people told me I couldn't say stride gum. We said stride, 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 every single place. My point was to prove that not only could we sell a piece of branded content at scale, at the same level that anybody could sell any piece of quality content, is that if you create quality, and the only way you judge it are people willing to actually pay to go see it, that you hold yourself to a different standard. So I think we're going to see that. But I think what's going to be interesting in a world where we have pressure, market pressure, is, COVID had negative impacts on so many levels, but on the corporate level, one of the pieces that it did is it forced organizations to change the way that they operate. It forced organizations to ask themselves, can they accomplish things in totally different ways? Like before that, we thought that, the only way organizations could change is if I brought in a change agent, one person that could change the whole organization, pull a rabbit out of the hat. And then all of a sudden you realize that every single employee inside that organization is a change agent. And unfortunately, I believe that we radically did that, and our organization survived because of the ability of the human capital that we have and the investment in the belief. We had no choice but to believe in their ability, right? As we came back out of that, we forgot those lessons learned. And now I think with the pressures of the market, we're going to force ourselves, hopefully, to go back and actually rethink the way that we operate our organizations to be more efficient. So for me, I'm looking at the recession, or I don't want to say that word necessarily, but market pressures, as a way to continue to settle the reset of organizations so that they can actually come out on the other side stronger. And so I think that that's going to be a very, very, very healthy lesson learned. And I think we're seeing the pullback, of spending in the early quarters. And I think that that's going to force a continued rethink. And that, to me, as crazy as that sounds, is the most exciting. In fact, somebody was saying to me the other day, oh, all this, ZBB, zero-based budgeting. What people don't realize is that zero-based budgeting was the fuel that drove the innovation for the transformation of Oreo. Because in the absence of the pressure to force ourselves to think different, to spend less, to shift our media budgets, in order to recoup savings and at the same time drive top line, we would not have made those changes. And so sometimes those pressures are necessary to get people to operate differently. And that's what I'm really excited about for this year. And I know that's a weird answer, but.
No, it's great. I mean, sometimes pressure is the ultimate driver for, right?
Because I mean, look, all these technologies are great. We sat in a meeting, we sat in the workshop today and everybody's talking about social commerce. And the reality is you're seeing results like 40x click-through rates. I mean, like numbers that are crazy, but at the same time, you don't see any of the brands moving. And the reason why they don't move is there's continued fear. And the only way to get over that fear is to force, right? And so you need forcing functions. And to me, I'm still blown away that you see the trend, even in the business that we're in. Look, the only place to find growth, and growth is the only game in town, is uninvested in opportunities in communities. And right now, you can't tell me, if you're a brand, and you can literally sit across the table from me and tell me that you feel that you reach the most amount of diverse consumers that you can that can drive your product, then great. But the majority of companies can't. And yet we're asking the same question. Well, is it going to grow my business? Of course, guys. Like, this is like, what do we, and so there's these absence of belief systems. And I believe those belief systems are put in place when forced to have to believe in a different North Star.
So let me ask you, because we started touching on it, and this falls squarely into the trends conversation. A year ago, 2 years ago, if I'm sitting here with marketers and I ask them what are the biggest trends that they're thinking about for the year, DE&I was top. Oh, we're going to be putting into different programs into place. It's going to be the biggest engine for us. We're going to be, and unfortunately, I've sat here for the last 2 days, and it's maybe come up a couple times. How do we move from diversity investment internally and externally as a brand, whether it's through hiring and talent or through investing in the diverse agency partners, diverse creators and media companies? How does that become the norm versus a box to check or a PR buzzword?
I think there's two pieces to that, really. Is that one, I think a lot of the pressure and commitments were made from a social component, which is, this is the right thing. And by the way, don't get me wrong. At the end of the day, look, 0.2% of media is Black-owned, 0.5% is female-owned. The rest of the marginalized group falls somewhere in between there. So you're talking about a 99%. And what's sad about that is that media shapes the narrative that shapes society. I had a great conversation with Rashma at Girls Who Code many, many moons ago. And I said, what can we do? We were looking for something to do with Swedish Fish. She said, create more movies and TV shows showcasing women as scientists. And she said, when Atari came out, the user was 50-50, females, males. And then all of a sudden we started showcasing boys as gamers. And guess what? We dropped an entire portion of society. And then later on we learned, guess what? Gaming ties to math and science. And now we have a discrepancy in media cause that. So yes, from a societal standpoint, there's no question that this is the right thing to do, but that's missing the reality of, look, I love doing the right thing and I wish every business just did the right thing. But at the end of the day, unfortunately, the right thing is also tied, in the best is when they can align together, is tied to delivering profits. And so again, to my point is, the conversation that really needs to shift is, this is not just about diversity and inclusion because it's a good thing to do, right? This is about, where are we going to find growth for organizations and businesses? Look at the most successful movie that we've had over the last 20 years, right? Black Panther. I mean, it's a pretty basic scenario. It said, look, superheroes are a growing genre, but they have absence of representation. What if we put representation? Will we open up a totally new market and at the same time not alienate an existing? Guess what? We will. And Contos. And so that's the point. And that's going to take leadership to say, organization, this is about, look, we know the complexion. Just the census data tells us the complexion of the consumer is not going to look today. They don't even look today like they did yesterday. I mean, and that's the funny thing. We talk about 5 years from now. It's not even 5 years. It's right now. Right now, most of your organizations are not reaching a consumer that, by the way, is a faster spender. You realize that just the economic spending power of just Black Americans, it would be the 14th largest GDP, bigger than Mexico. So, I mean, and by the way, they spend faster in a recession. There's categories that they overspend and over-index on, and yet many of the brands are not reaching them. And so the conversation needs to be quickly shifted from a good to a necessity because it is the driver of growth. And so that's where I think we'll start to see the conversation shift. But we also have to be honest that this also takes time. Now, look, I sat through the year of mobile, which was like the 2 decades of mobile, right? And so the reality is that it takes time. It took me 5 years to shift from 3% spending in digital to 32% spending in digital, but we did it. We added $2 billion of top line, $300 million. At the end of the day, it's going to require leaders who believe that it is going to drive their business. And that's what you're going to see. The winners you're going to see are those that truly believe. And I'm surprised today that it's not about commitments, it's about being committed, right? And that's and I'm surprised that today we still don't have leaders that have stood up and said, I'm trying, I did it. And that's the difference. We know how this stuff is done, right? When we wanted tech forward companies, guess what? We put tech people on the board. When we wanted companies to go green, we measured and tracked and we got there. It's like almost saying, okay, I'm going to aspire to sell 2% more cookies. Oops, I didn't get there. It's not my fault. No. Get there. And that's kind of what I'm waiting for in the industry is what leader is going to step out and say, that's what I always said. When I said I wanted to get to 10% spending in mobile, I did it. So I could be like, I get it, you lose, I win, drop the mic, I'm out. So what leader, and also it drove our business, right? That was the goal. What leader is going to show real resolve and moving that forward. And I've seen that on so many efforts, whether it's Indra moving Pepsi into nutrition, where everybody told her, keep selling sugar water, right? The Wall Street Journal said that. And then here you go, 7 years later, Fortune said Indra was right. Of course, but it took resolve and belief. And that's the question is, what organizations have real leaders that believe that this is going to drive growth and drive that mindset through the company so that we're not talking about D&I initiatives, but we're actually talking about the growth initiatives for organizations. The same thing with me in e-commerce, right? So
absolutely. And I hope we see it. I mean, it's about doing it, not saying it. I think that's
100%.
Right? Again, we talk about trends, but we also talk about challenges, right? What is keeping you up at night? Or better yet, I know, again, we just talked about one big challenge, but what do you see out there that you'd like to see the industry tackle? What are the biggest challenges or a big challenge facing the marketing industry today?
Again, I think the biggest challenge is in that inclusion space. I think the single biggest challenge is to create mechanisms so that the companies that are being built in this space have the skills and tools that they need to be able to be successful so that they can help the advertising organizations be successful. And that's what we fail to realize, that this is about the entire industry helping the ecosystem build. You're talking about an ecosystem that has been woefully underinvested in, that has been historically challenged, and at the same time have won to the best of their ability, even outside of the adversity, but offer the greatest opportunity for growth. And yet we are not sitting and supporting. Look, the crazy thing is when I shifted over from, when I started buying television, which was, I had never done it before, the one thing I learned is that the news that you get is, look, I got good news and I got bad news. The bad news is ratings are down. The good news is you're going to pay more money. Harder to reach audience, premium audience, but yet we don't treat inclusive properties in the same way, although the inventory is the most sought after. There's $25 billion of media that wants to go into just black owned, and there's maybe $1 billion of inventory. 25x differential. That's a premium opportunity, but yet we don't treat it that way, right? And so I think for me, the largest challenge is going to be, is the ecosystem truly going to support the growth of these businesses so that they can unlock the growth that sits in front of them? And it's so funny because, I don't miss any day being on the other side. The only thing I miss is the ability to execute on the things that the industry knows is right, but nobody is willing to go actually do it, get it done, so that I could show the industry that it was possible. and that we could create a roadmap so that others could follow, so they weren't worried whether they were the ones jumping off the deep end and are going to sink or swim, even though, quite frankly, everybody knows that it's going to be successful. The question is just, it's going to be a journey, and who's willing to put the work in to get to that journey. So, you know, that to me, I think is going to be the hardest challenge, which is who's actually going to do the work.
And set the precedent.
And set the precedent. But I'm blown away that we don't have that today, that we are not seeing that. Now, we're seeing glimmers of that. You know, there's a lot of folks that have done a lot in that direction, but we haven't seen anybody stand up and say, done, you know, here's the beginning of the roadmap.
Absolutely.
So,
well, I hope we make more progress, and I hope to see your continued efforts.
You know me, I'm not going to stop. Can't stop, won't stop.
I love it. Well, thank you so much, Bonin. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you, sir.
Always a pleasure. Thank you for being here.